Chessman Dan, playing chess every day until we get a chess. Continuing our road to 1500 ELO. Played around 7 games today. Only won 2, but that's alright. So, in today's video, I'll be covering how to play the CARO-KANN exchange variation. Or rather, how does this exchange variation look like at the 1000 ELO range? So, kicking off, CARO-KANN exchange variation only occurs when opponent plays e4, followed by c6 CARO-KANN, and opponent pushes his pawn to d4, and immediate response to d5. When you're playing a CARO-KANN, it's a very awesome opening, played from the intermediate to early beginner late stages of chess, all the way up to the pro level. Now, what is the exchange variation? Well, the exchange variation is when the opponent pushes his pawn to e5, therefore advancing his pawn. This is actually the most difficult or the most challenging way to face the CARO-KANN. This is very similar to the French defense. The French defense and the CARO-KANN share a lot of similarities. The only difference being that the French defense does block the dark squared bishop. But regardless, if you're facing the CARO-KANN or French defense, advanced variation is a pretty challenging way to meet it. So I've responded to c5. There's different ways of approaching it. You could, push your pawn up. c5 I found to be the best from my research of seeing pros play the CARO-KANN and hearing their advices. My opponent responds pawn to c4, or c3, excuse me. And the moment I see this pawn, I'm like, all right, I got to take. Let's destroy their pawn structure. Now, whenever you're studying an opening, it's always good to understand the middle game. And specifically speaking, during the CARO-KANN advanced variation, the whole name of the game, at least, for the most part, is earning this pawn. If we're able to win this d4 pawn, eventually this pawn will fall, and the e5 pawn will fall, and we'll have a way of good position. My opponent, I decide now to go c6. This is just straight up theory, book moves. And my opponent decides to over defend his pawn. If we pull up the evaluation, it's currently sitting at 0.3. I just don't think this is the best way for the variation. There's better ways, more natural moves of defending this pawn. For example, the most natural move is moving out this knight. However, moving out this knight usually gets met with pin, because that's just kind of how it goes. Instead, now I decide to go pawn I decide to move my bishop to f5. Okay, I don't know why it's all white now. Regardless, so the whole idea with bishop f5 is we need to activate our bishop, and we're essentially closing this this file off. I don't know if that's like the best way to explain it, but in my head, the way I remember the move patterns for the opening is the moment we break this pawn structure. So if we go back to c3, we need to break this pawn structure. We need to put a knight here, and we need to close it off. However, before we close this off, this e file off, we need to kick out our bishop. If the opponent would have developed his knight, we would pin. If there's no knight to pin, we would just move our light squared bishop to c5. Excuse me, I can't speak at all. f5. And we should have a pretty good game. So the moment I kick out my bishop to f5, my opponent decides to offer a bishop exchange. I didn't mind this exchange. The reason being is a lot of times in the CARO-KANN, I faced my opponent trying to mate me with a combination of a battery with a light squared bishop and the queen. So why not? We'll take. I now decide to close it off. So yes, both of our light squares have gone weaker. However, I'm creating a pretty nice pawn structure on my light squares to compensate. My opponent decides to go a3. I then decide to kick out my other knight. And here, my opponent decides to pin. What is this action doing? It's a typical move. I've seen this quite a lot in the exchange variation where my opponent will pin my knight to my queen. I don't think this is the best move. If we open up the evaluation bar, even though we go from being a pretty even position to now he loses. And from my understanding, if I have to give 1000 ELO expertise, I would say you're just losing tempo, right? I'm quickly developing all my minor pieces, and instead of my opponent developing his knight and getting the king to safety, he's doing a needless pin. This really doesn't accomplish anything. And now you already gave up one bishop. Do you really want to lose 2 bishops early in the game? I decided to move my queen out. It was pretty common once we're getting close to fully developing, right? Typically, I would like to castle. However, I found in the past that instead of, you know, this queen is very good because there's times where you could offer a queen exchange while winning this pawn, or just winning this b2 pawn. Is that if I were to instead develop this knight, develop a bishop and then castle, I'm just wasting movements, right? Typically, you do want to castle. However, I just felt like, and based on experience, that instead of castling right now, we need to take some pawns. We're ready in the middle game. My opponent decides to go e2. I decided to take the free pawn. Here, my opponent decides to offer a queen exchange. Now, if you think, to keep the queens on the board or to not keep the queens on the board, with the CARO-KANN, right? I mentioned in my previous videos, plus there's plenty of content online that explain middle game ideas for the CARO-KANN, is we're attacking queenside. Yes, there are always opportunities to mate your opponent in any opening. However, the CARO-KANN isn't necessarily it's not really setting you up to mate your opponent unless your opponent gives you an opportunity. So you always gotta understand middle game ideas of what opening you're playing, and two, always respond to the demands of the position, right? What does that mean? If your opponent allows you to checkmate him. If not, follow the game plan. So I'm already up a pawn. In the moment, if I could get the queens off the board with one pawn advantage, and I feel like my development is just way better. I don't feel like it, I know so. Gives me less of a headache, and it allows me to continue my queenside advance. So I decided to take, and now I decided to push up this pawn. What's I do with this pawn? I'm very guilty of often forgetting, to add these little spikes. It's just to prevent these knights on the board. There's a lot of times in the CARO-KANN, if we go back to here, right? A lot of times my opponent will kick this out, and I usually am able to get one knight off the board, which is pretty nice. However, because I'm dealing with two knights, I decided, hey, let's prevent a knight storm, because the worst thing you could do is a knight storms. Now my opponent has a castle. I go c8. The idea with c8 is there's no need to keep my knight unnecessarily pinned now that the queen's gone, and I'm rerouting. Right? The whole idea is a queen side. My king side is pretty safe. Why not? Opponent goes c3. I go b6. And now my opponent is attacking king side. So if you see, king side versus queen side advance. I go h3, h6. The whole idea. Two, another principle I'm trying to practice. Excuse me, especially with the CARO-KANN, is you got to look at it as which side you're attacking. So right, you're attacking king side, and then you got to imagine there's a little square on top of your king that any enemy pieces, specifically minority pieces that get on here, you want to kick them out. So now my opponent decides to retreat. I go c6, c4. The whole idea is I'm gaining tempo. My opponent pushes a4 pawn, and now I move my king. The idea with the king is I don't really feel like it's necessary to castle at this point. Instead, I need to get my rooks connected, and I need to get my king more active. Here, my opponent decides to attack this backwards pawn. I decide to naturally defend it. So in this position, I'm winning. Obviously, you can't see the evaluation board while you're playing. But, the whole idea is, all right, we're playing a positional game. I need to make sure that I need to make improving moves at the same time, need to respond to what my opponent wants. Here, rook f1, I go g6, let's kick out this knight, and then he checks me. This check is kind of harmless. I just move my king, and he goes back. I go h5, now I'm gaining some more tempo on the knight. And now, my opponent's knight is on f6. However, if you notice, it's not really accomplishing anything. It's just kind of out of the game. Now I go a3. The whole idea with a3 is I'm trying to block this rook's vision as well as potentially winning this knight. My opponent sees what I'm trying to do. He moves his knight, and now I have the vision while maintaining control. Here, my opponent decides to move his rook again. I don't understand what is he trying to do, but obviously it's kind of a suffocating position my opponent has, so he's slowly trying to make improving moves. I now decide to push my pawn to b5. And here, my opponent decides to offer a bishop exchange. Now, you can take the bishop exchange, there's nothing wrong with it. However, instead of doing that bishop exchange, because I'm going to win it regardless, let's get another pawn and open up the b file. My opponent takes, and then now I take with the rook. To take or to not to take, right? It's easier. I just felt like we did the calculations, what's the real difference? And I think if we go here, it's about the same. It doesn't really matter at this point. I decided, hey, let's get the rooks off the board. And now I'm getting a little bit of tempo on this rook. My opponent moves his rook to c1, attacking this pinned knight. I decided to unpin my knight as well as defend it, right? So now we're essentially, I would argue this is probably the end game. An active king is a better king, right? And also, I need to defend it. Now my opponent decides to attack my knight, which is hanging, and within a few seconds move, and decide to push my pawn. This is a very good move. I think during evaluation, this is given a great. Why is that? Because it's the only move to defend a knight, right? As well as, I'm 2 squares away from promoting. So if I could get this rook off the board, there's no way they're going to stop me. My opponent goes d7. I take the free pawn. Like I said, the whole point of the exchange variation is I need this pawn. And once I have it, I just have a crushing position, right? I'm only up 3 points of material, but the evaluation says I'm up 6. I'm winning this game. The moment I get these rooks off the board, I'm going to promote. I'm going to win. Here, my opponent now is quickly trying to concoct some sort of night storm on my position. However, I just didn't feel like I was trying to quickly calculate, like, can he do immediate threats? I was like, not really. And he could probably try to do something with those knights, but he's just too slow. He didn't have the tempo. So I know I'll go a5. Let's just keep him out. He moves his knight. I unpin my knight. So the whole point of moving this, moving my king out the way, does 2 functions. A, unpins my knight, right? And B, if my opponent decides to take my knight, I take a knight too. So kind of multi-purpose. Here my opponent moves out of safety and I take. And then he takes. So now we got 1 knight each. I'm up 3 points of material. However, the evaluation says I'm 9 points of material ahead. Why is that? All my pawns advance versus my opponent. I have a pawn close to promotion, and if I play my cards right and don't blunder, there's no way he's gonna stop it. I now go rook b8, offering a rook exchange, and that's the end of the game. My opponent resigns. This was a really good game because this is the best game I played all day. It was kind of nice to end off with a banger. The CARO-KANN, I'm getting a lot of experience with. Even the games that I lose with the CARO-KANN, I think in this game evaluation, it said I played a 92% overall accuracy and a 98% opening. Even when I lose, the games that I lose, you could go on my chess.com account, my opening accuracy is usually 93% and above. A lot of times 100%, more often than not. Regardless, good game. I'm definitely going to feel like I'm hitting a plateau in terms of my progress, which is natural. But I'm happy that in 2 months, we're able to hit the 1,000 range. And thanks for anyone who watches. See you tomorrow.